This is White Plains Week, the weekly roundup of White Plains, Westchester, and world news. With John Bailey, editor and publisher of the daily internet newspaper White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, WPCNR.com. Jim Benerofe, editor and publisher of SuburbanStreet.com and WhitePlains.com. And me, Peter Katz, formerly with NBC, ABC News, and stations from Boston to Los Angeles. White Plains Week, what's happening, who are the newsmakers, what's in store for the future. The views and opinions expressed on this program are solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76, Verizon Fios Channel 45, and on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. Now, White Plains Week.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. White Plains, Westchester, and the world at large. John Bailey with Peter Katz, the anchor for all seasons on my right, and the Dean of Journalism in the School of White Plains, right? Jim Benerofe with the headlines.
And here are the headlines now for the Passover and Easter week, March 29th, 2018. The first robin arrives and thinks he made a big mistake. Passover and Easter week begin. Largest demonstration in White Plains since 9/11. Candlelight walk brings thousands to march for their lives. Westchester leaders do not let up on Con Edison and New York State Gas and Electric. Assemblyman David Buchwald hears criticisms of utilities from 70 leaders at Westchester County Center. County Executive George Latimer says this kind of response cannot happen ever again. Board of Legislators Latimer demand stiff fines on the two utilities from the Public Service Commission, without fines paid for with rate increases. White Plains begins labor negotiations with its 4 unions. We will have a Trump weather report on the damage from Hurricane Stormy. County Executive George Latimer reaches out to the Bronx to build Bronx and Westchester success together and lobbying muscle. Kingsbridge National Ice Center is in final stage of approval. Ebersole Rink holds spring skating show.
And it's opening day of the baseball season, right? Opening week, great. Right now, to the White Plains, real, wow, it's tough to say, March of Time, and there he is, the first robin. We spotted him last week, and doesn't he look a little nervous to you? But there he was, but it was a good sign. And then, of course, we had, the holiday week began, and hot cross buns are back in season. Delicious. But first, we start with the shocker of the week. And the shocker of the week was the March for Our Lives. That was them joining, and this is them starting, and Peter Katz was there.
Well, you know, John, there's somewhat of a dispute over the crowd estimate for the number of people who descended on Washington, D.C. last Saturday for the March for Our Lives, conceived by students from Parkland High School in Florida. Now, Fox News says it was only 200,000. MSNBC, CNN, NBC, CBS, and ABC and others report the number as 800,000. And the pictures certainly seem to support the 800,000 number. Nevertheless, the cause received overwhelming support, with hundreds of additional marches taking place on every continent except Antarctica.
The March for Our Lives, held in White Plains on March 24th, was one of approximately 800 taking place in the U.S. and other countries, too, in the wake of the Parkland, Florida High School massacre. Several thousand people, from children to senior citizens, gathered at the Post Road School in White Plains, then marched along Post Road to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and to the plaza between the county courthouse and the White Plains Public Library, where a rally was held. local high school students organized the event, drawing on the resources of groups experienced with similar demonstrations. In keeping with the policy established by the Parkland students who conceived the national demonstration, the principal speakers were all students. White Plains Mayor Tom Roach was asked to make welcoming remarks.
Here's what's exciting for me. I started this day thinking of somber things to say, but as soon as I got here, I started to feel the general vibe, which is joy. There is joy that the majority is being heard, that the majority is speaking out, and we are being led. We are being led by our youngest.
Principal organizer was White Plains High School senior Kelly Marks.
Some people may ask why I decided to lead the Westchester County March for Our Lives. The simple answer is I'm tired, scared, and I've had enough. Why do we have to continue to hear about shooting after shooting? It is enough. Why do we have to wake up every morning scared to go to school? No youth should have to wake up in the morning wondering if this will be the day they die.
Caitlin Belf attends Fox Lane High School.
In this country, we may have a right to bear arms, but we also have a right to an education, and a right to feel safe while getting it.
Cameron Lauer goes to Woodlands High.
This is unacceptable, and all states should take it upon themselves to regulate acquisition of such rifles as the AR-15 used by the Parkland shooter. Parkland, Newtown, Orlando, Vegas, places where gunmen use rifles like the AR-15 to take away the lives of roughly 150 men, women, and children. Men, women, and children like the ones in this crowd. Men, women, and children that go to school, that have jobs, families, lives.
Autumn Gerard is from Brewster High School.
To those who view what we are doing here today as an infringement on their Second Amendment right, more than twice as many people have been killed by guns in the last year alone in the United States than were killed during the entirety of the Revolutionary War. Automatic weapons did not exist when the Second Amendment was written. When it was written, they owned muskets that took 2 minutes to reload. They never could have imagined the evolution of our guns. And even if they could have, our right to live will outweigh your right to own a weapon of mass destruction. Every time!
John, there's a movement that is afoot in this country, and we saw some of the beginnings of it right here in White Plains.
Well, thank you for that very moving, professional, excellent video that captured the spirit of that day. Thank you, Peter. That was one of your great jobs here. And moving on, all this had to, of course, do with what was happening nationally. And it seems natural that we should take a look at what happened with President Trump this week.
Well, you know, while the marches were taking place, President Trump was, any guesses?
Mar-a-Lago.
On the golf course.
Yes, playing golf.
In fact, we're told that his motorcade took a rather circuitous route to avoid demonstrators.
He has no guts.
John Dowd, who resigned as President Trump's lead defense lawyer in the corruption, collusion, and money laundering investigation of Trump, his family, and campaign colleagues, is reported to have told lawyers for Trump aide Michael Flynn, who has entered a guilty plea and is cooperating with special counsel Robert Mueller, and former Trump campaign boss Paul Manafort, who has been indicted, that they shouldn't cooperate with Mueller because Trump would issue presidential pardons. Now, if this reporting is correct, that could be witness tampering and obstruction of justice at the least, and that could mean jail for Dowd and anyone who conspired with him. 2 lawyers who Trump was going to hire to replace Dowd were dropped. When it came out, they both had conflicts of interest, and a lawyer in Brunswick, Georgia, is now stepping in. Trump has fired David Shulkin as Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Shulkin was slowing down Trump's effort to privatize the Veterans Administration, a cause into which the right-wing billionaire Koch brothers have pumped a lot of money. He also was under fire for taking his wife on a European vacation paid for by us taxpayers. Shulkin blamed what he called the toxic and chaotic environment in Washington for interfering with his work to straighten out the VA. He has made tremendous strides, actually, in improving VA operations and health care services for veterans. The White House has announced that Trump will nominate his personal doctor at the White House, Navy Admiral Ronnie Jackson, to replace Shulkin. A federal judge has ruled that a lawsuit alleging that Trump has violated the Constitution can move forward. The lawsuit alleges that Trump has enriched himself with money from foreign governments. The Emoluments Clause of the Constitution forbids presidents from taking any kind of benefit from a foreign government. The lawsuit alleges that foreign governments have been spending a ton of money at Trump's new hotel in Washington in order to curry favor with him. Among the plaintiffs in the lawsuit are operators of other hotels and restaurants in Washington whose business has been hurt because the foreign governments have been spending their money at Trump's place. The ratings for 60 Minutes last Sunday, when it ran the interview with porn star Stormy Daniels about her affair with Trump, were the highest in 10 years, and double what the show had done the Sunday before. The overnight Nielsen's showed about 27 million viewers saw the interview, 27,000,001 if you count John. By comparison, that's about 10 times.
I read the transcript.
By comparison, that's about 10 times what Bill O'Reilly used to get on Fox and slightly more than White Plains Week gets. The attorney for Daniels, Michael Avenatti, had asked a federal judge for permission to put President Trump and Trump's private attorney, Michael Cohen, under oath in depositions in the lawsuit Cohen filed against Daniels regarding the confidentiality agreement about her affair with Trump after he had married Melania, and the judge has that in abeyance right now. John Bolton, who Trump intends to make the new White House security advisor, may be mixed up in some things which could lead to charges of violating campaign laws, illegally conspiring with foreigners in a U.S. election, and possibly colluding with the Russians and Cambridge Analytica, the London-based firm funded by right-wing billionaire Robert Mercer, which captured the Facebook data on 50 million American voters. MSNBC's Rachel Maddow's show broke that story.
It's breathtaking, isn't it? Don't you think? Right. Any comments on the march?
I think it was very good. I think that they've got to become more focused on what they're going to actually try to accomplish. I definitely think they should ban automatic weapons, and I think they should, stress that. And
Peter, your comments on the march?
Well, as I said before, we are seeing the beginning of a movement. These kids are serious. They are the future voters, and they are going to, number one, channel their efforts into targeting the politicians who are in a position right now to pass legislation at the state level and also at the federal level. And two, they're going to target getting their people out to vote.
Yes, very important.
Something like 5 million new voters of that age turning 18, over 18, will be eligible to vote.
Right. Now, some politicians continue to turn on Con Edison and New York State Electric and Gas. That is wrong slide there, folks. We will get to that later. But be that as it may, they had a conference on Monday with David Buchwald, our assemblyman, and George Latimer, the county executive, again, keeping the pressure on Con Edison and NYSEG.
Throughout my district, both in Con Ed and NYSEG territories, but frankly the storm united all of Westchester, both in terms of its impact, but also in terms of the reaction of government officials in recognizing that our utility companies fell short compared to expectations. And I think it's really incumbent upon us to make sure that the poor response is not repeated again. So what we did on Friday is something that I don't think has ever happened in Westchester history, at least to my knowledge, which is we brought together officials from every level of government representing Westchester, local, county, state, and federal, and their representatives to have a discussion and to start the dialogue between governments as to how we can produce a unified response from our county. It's very important for us to speak with one very clear voice because the people of Westchester
3 weeks ago, and a commitment, and this is the important part, to move forward in solving those problems for the future. One of the greatest problems when you have a crisis is that when the crisis ends, the desire to solve the problem ends as well. People tend to forget over a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks what the frustrations were when they were in the middle of that type of situation. But I think the best way to phrase it is now we turn collective anger into collective action. And that action involves a host of different things. So we're in a process, and the process, as it advances, will identify certain things. Something Buchwald will cover some of those things. There's any number of things that may ultimately come out of this. We might, at the end of the day, advocate for a group phone call with the utility companies prior to a storm happening, so we can review what the advanced preparedness is, instead of having to react to what happens afterwards. And a host of things that David will cover in his comments. But I would say this before we turn it over. The situation here is not merely to hold individuals accountable or entities accountable, but it is to make sure that what happened doesn't happen again. That's the most important thing. The most important thing is to change the way things are done so that we don't have those experiences repeat again to the best of our ability. That's what we put at the top of our list of things. Assemblyman Davis, Assemblyman Buchwald will cover some of those things. There's any number of things that may ultimately come out of this. We might, at the end of the day, advocate for a group phone call with the utility companies prior to a storm happening, so we can review what the advanced preparedness is, instead of having to react to what happens afterwards. And a host of things that David will cover in his comments. But I would say this before we turn it over. The situation here is not merely to hold individuals accountable or entities accountable, but it is to make sure that what happened doesn't happen again. That's the most important thing. The most important thing is to change the way things are done so that we don't have those experiences repeat again to the best of our ability. That's what we put at the top of our list of things. Assemblyman David Buchwald.
Thank you very much, County Executive Latimer.
Right. And that was George Latimer saying he definitely wanted to find out how many trucks and crews more Con Ed needed to get into action right away. So this continues to be a major issue that they are not letting go. Do you think this is going to succeed? What do you think?
I think Con Edison is going to do the job that Con Edison does. During the last nor'easter we had, the winds weren't very strong. There wasn't too much snow in our area, and they did just fine. Con Ed had practically no problem. So it all depends upon the nature of what Mother Nature throws at us.
Yes. Now, the Board of Legislators also demanded stiff fines on the two utilities from the Public Service Commission, and that is something they are going to push. So we'll see how the Public Service Commission handles it. Now, White Plains began labor negotiations for unions on Monday evening in executive session, and what is intriguing about this situation is they are without a contract at the end of June. So now it behooves the mayor and his negotiators maybe to get a 4-year contract so we do not have labor problems the year before Mr. Roach is up for re-election again, or whoever it is. Do you think they can get a 4-year contract?
I think they can try to get any contract they want. Whether they can end up getting it is something.
What typically happens, it can be anything from settling a union contract before it runs out to letting it expire and then negotiating. And sometimes negotiations drag on for months, sometimes a year, sometimes even longer than that. And ultimately, they agree. Typically, 3-year contract is what you see. 4 years is nice. It's easier if your term happens to be 4 years to have a contract that runs 4 years. Yes. But eventually there will be some kind of reasonable settlement because when push comes to shove, unions tend to be ultimately quite reasonable when it comes time to stop the negotiation and to end the dance and just sign a contract.
And we're at labor peace right now. Labor peace reigns in White Plains, and if you give them, say, like a 2.5, 2 3/4 a 3 and a 3.5 over the 4 years, that would be quite reasonable.
The issue, of course, becomes, how much can the city afford to give in the way of increased benefits, in the way of increased wages, and what happens to the level of income coming into the city, and does the city have to raise property taxes in order to pay for a contract? And that's going to be very tough, because just as the new federal tax law is putting pressure on homeowners, that in turn puts pressure on governments to keep their tax increases to a bare minimum, preferably no tax increase at all. But the fact of the matter is, because of what the federal government has done, virtually everyone in White Plains who owns property or pays taxes to New York State is going to have to pay more tax to the federal government because of the end of full deductibility for real estate and local taxes.
The unions should be going through the effects of taxes on them now if they want to negotiate smartly.
Couple of things, John. Former county executive.
Sorry, we have to go to the visit to the federal courthouse in the Bronx by George Latimer, where he brings in the Bronx. That is the George Latimer out in front of the Bronx County Courthouse. And here's how that meeting with Mr. Diaz, the president of the Bronx, went.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Borough Hall. I'm Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., and I've had an exciting day so far welcoming my friend who we served with in the New York State Assembly and has had a distinguished Senate career. And now I'm so proud that he is the county executive of Westchester County in county exec George Latimer. George, welcome to the Bronx.
Thank you, Ruben.
It was great to be with you and your team. The fact is that when you look at the Bronx, the only borough connected to the continental United States, and you look at the many issues, whether it's healthcare, transportation, economic development, technology, there's a lot of synergy and there's a lot of back and forth in our constituents. So it is always great when you have someone with the vision, with the foresight, as George, to come and see how is it that neighboring counties can work together. The fact is that when you look at the Bronx, the only borough connected to the continental United States, and you look at the many issues, whether it's healthcare, transportation, economic development, technology, there's a lot of synergy and there's a lot of back and forth in our constituents. So it is always great when you have someone with the vision, with the foresight, as George, to come and see how is it that neighboring counties can work together. He's the county executive of Westchester County in county exec George Latimer. George, welcome to the Bronx.
Thank you, Ruben.
It was great to be with you and your team.
We've committed that those people will work directly with the borough president's economic development team. And we're going to specifically look for ways that we can work together to attract businesses into the area regionally, and then determine perhaps what type of a tourism strategy will come out of that as well. Because when people are in this region, there's terrific things to do in both the Bronx and in Westchester, which we could linkage. And if we can do those things, that would be helpful. And I think the borough president's going to get an invitation to come to one of our major events at the Kensico Dam in Westchester. I think he's going to have me down for something and we'll sort of show off a little bit, because as he said, many of our residents began in the Bronx. I grew up literally on the Mount Vernon Bronx border, so I think you're going to see us take some of those initial steps. But the economic development linkage and the linkage between our transportation routes is critical. The lobbying that we'll do together to make sure that the MTA and the road system is of the highest quality. We will be partners together in that, and that starts today.
Clayland, does Westchester see inviting more residents from the Bronx and making it easier for them to come to Playland and raise the Playland attendance?
Yes, that's one of the topics we talked about. You have here in the Bronx at the Kingsbridge Armory facility a dynamic plan for what's going to be a recreational facility of great note. There are Westchester people that are going to be interested in using that. And similarly, we rank a significant percentage of our playland users as coming out of the Bronx. So I think we're going to talk about transportation methods that would make it easier, and certainly it's going to help us. Our mission is to grow the attendance at playland, get the additional revenue we need to run it profitably. It is a unique facility, and just as the Botanical Gardens here in the Bronx is a unique facility, and Yankee Stadium is a unique facility, so is Playland, so is Empire City. And I think that cross-border tourism is going to be very critical in how we decide the things that we might promote jointly are all part of what our plans going forward will be.
Okay, Peter.
I just wanted to mention that former County Executive Rob Astorino has been appearing as a guest commentator on CNN, and his Deputy County Executive Kevin Plunkett has joined Simone Development Companies as a Director of Strategic Initiatives. Nice title.
Right. Now, regarding that ice skating center in the Bronx, which we see, well, we'll go to the Ebersol rink first. And this was the Ebersol rink ice show. And there's Tom Roach, the mayor, who attended the whole show, and Isabel Michelle singing the national anthem. She did a great job. And this was a look at some of the skaters who put on the show. And these are all the skaters at the Ebersol Rink Figure Skating School, led by Amy Mancini, and they really enjoyed themselves in the show, and all the parents and spectators did too. It was one of the more splendid shows. This happens every year, and we really love this show. You should come out and see it next year. And next we have a look at a show that you and I saw, Jim, and that was the Escape from Margaritaville. And the reason I'm showing this is it got such a bad review that it caused the reviewer, who panned it in the Times, to make an excuse for his bad review on the second page. And believe me, Jim, you and I both thought this was a spectacular show, entertaining, funny.
Yeah, you definitely should see this show. I would see it again. I mean, it's terrific.
Yeah. Throw that review out the window.
It's about Jimmy Buffett, right? It features his music.
That's right, but it's funny. It's written by a couple of sitcom stars from television, and they are funny. And the music is, of course, great, as always. And last on the agenda is opening day, and that is Yankee Stadium outside the Bronx County Courthouse. And unfortunately, if you take a look at the next slide, you will see that there is a problem. Two lanes only are open on the Major Deegan going north. In fact, created a tremendous backup all the way around and up to exit 153 on the Bruckner Expressway. So if this is not cleared up by Monday, allow extra time if you're driving, or take the train. This is a massive, stupid situation. And meanwhile, I would also like to point out that we've run out of time. And
happy Passover, happy Easter.
Right. John Bailey, Peter Katz, Jim Benerofe. Good night.
This has been White Plains Week. News and commentary about White Plains, Westchester, and the world. The views and opinions expressed on this program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week, produced by White Plains Citizen Net Reporter, and presented on Optimum Cable Channel 76 and Verizon Fios Channel 45. You may view White Plains Week anytime on the internet at whiteplainsweek.com, youtube.com, and wpcommunitymedia.org. For White Plains Week, this is Peter Katz speaking.